In the heart of darkness, among the silent shadows, lurk stories that will make even the bravest tremble. Welcome to Dark Terrors channel. I'm here to share with you 3 true or assumed stories, horror stories that happened in America after returning from work to normal people, who told me they want to remain anonymous. Before starting, remember to subscribe to the channel, like, comment and share this story with your friends. And to not miss any of our stories, activate the bell.
Story 1. The Service Station. It was a cold winter evening, and a thick fog had crept over the landscape, wrapping everything in an icy embrace. I had just finished a long day's work and, as always, the prospect of returning home was the only thing that appealed to me. It kept standing. That evening, the traffic congestion on the main road was worse than usual, so I decided to turn onto an old country road that I barely knew. Darkness enveloped the road and my car's headlights could barely pierce the fog. As I drove down the road, an old abandoned gas station appeared before me. It was a forgotten wreck, its broken glass like empty eyes staring at me. They stared. I got out of the car, attracted by an inexplicable curiosity. The air was freezing and the atmosphere ghostly. Everything seemed eerie, as if the whole place was enveloped by an invisible presence. Then I heard a scream. An inhuman scream that seemed to come from beyond the grave. It froze my blood. It sounded like a cry of pain, a cry for help that rang out in the depths of the night. A shiver ran down my spine. I then remembered the story circulating about that gas station. In the late 1970s, it had been the site of a brutal massacre. A heinous event of which the culprit had never been discovered. Even today, the locals told of strange events, noises and voices coming from that place. And in that moment, I realized that I had become a part of that story. I felt watched, as if I was surrounded by a heavy atmosphere of fear and anguish. A bitter taste filled my mouth, and I felt goosebumps all over my body. I panicked and fled, leaving the darkness and the sounds of the gas station behind. That night, I experienced real terror. I heard the voices of the past, the echoes of a horrible tragedy. And even today, when night falls, I can hear those sounds, those desperate cries playing in my mind.
Story 2. The Shadow in the Corner. It was an evening like many others in the heart of New York. The city lights were shining in the dark, each with a story to tell. I was walking home like every evening after a long day of work, when I noticed something strange in an alley. It was a shadow, tall and indistinct. It seemed to be waiting, and it gave me a strange feeling. However, I decided to ignore it and continue on my way. But as I turned around, I realized that the shadow was following me. It was eerie. Every time I turned, the shadow moved with me. It seemed to dance along the alley walls, along the lines of the neon lights, clinging to my heels like a second skin. I ran, but I couldn't outrun her. Quote. My fear increased with every step, with every breath. My mind raced, trying to figure out what was going on. And then, in a moment of realization, I was reminded of an old urban legend. A mysterious shadow was said to roam the alleyways of the city, always lurking, always waiting. No one knew who or what it was, but over the years, many people had reported seeing it. Some claimed it was the shadow of a man who had met a violent end in that alley. Others believed he was a supernatural entity, tied to the neighborhood. At that moment, with the shadow dancing behind me, I felt a freezing cold pass through me. I fled home, with the shadow slowly receding behind me. Since that night, every time I pass by that alley, I can't help but look. The shadow has disappeared, but the memory of that night still lives in me. A memory that reminds me that we are never truly alone, not even on the busiest streets of New York.
Story 3. The Home Phone. There I was, sitting in the silence of my home, when I heard the lingering ringing of the phone. The old landline I'd forgotten to throw away, even though the line had been disconnected months ago as I no longer needed it. I slowly approached the phone, a sense of curiosity mixed with a touch of fear. Could it have been a mistake? A breakdown? But then, why exactly was my phone ringing? With a deep breath, I picked up the receiver. At first, there was just a slight rustle, like the wind whispering through a crack. Then, a voice came through. My voice. Just like mine, but with a cold, distant tone. The voice began to unravel a series of future events. The precision of the detail took my breath away. Tomorrow, said the voice, you will be called for an impromptu meeting at work. It will be about a project you are working on. They will be dissatisfied with progress and you will become frustrated. I didn't know what to think. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and questions. How could he have known about my plans at work? And how could he have foreseen a sudden meeting? Yet, the following day, exactly as predicted, I was called for an unexpected meeting and my superiors expressed their dissatisfaction with the project I was working on. The voice continued, at lunch next week, you will meet an old friend. You will argue and he will say things that will hurt you. The news of a meeting with an old friend surprised me. I had planned nothing of the sort. But the week next time, I received a text from a friend I hadn't seen in years. We met for lunch and indeed ended up arguing and the words spoken were biting, just as the voice foretold. The friend in question was Carlo, an old school friend with whom I had shared many moments during our adolescence. We had lost contact when we moved to different cities for university and, despite some messages of good wishes during the holidays, we hadn't really talked to each other for years. It was a surprise when I received a message from Carlo inviting me to lunch. He said he was in town for work and it would be nice to see us again. I accepted, thinking it would be a pleasant lunch, a journey into the past. At that moment, I remembered the phrases from the phone call. But over lunch, things took a different turn. Carlo began to talk about our days in high school, our dreams and ambitions. He said that I had changed, that I had moved away from who I once was, that I had sold my dreams for an office job. His words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I didn't expect it. Yes, my life was different than I had imagined it in high school, but I was happy with my path. Criticizing my choices hurt me deeply. The discussion became more intense and in the end, I walked out of the restaurant with a sense of bitterness. Carlo had said words that had hurt me, just as the voice on the phone had predicted. Finally, the voice said, your neighbor is going to have a car accident. He won't be seriously injured, but his car will be damaged. The prospect of an accident made me shudder. I didn't want to believe what I had heard. But one morning, a few days later, I was awakened by the sound of a crash and squealing brakes. I looked out the window and saw the car of my near damaged. Fortunately, as the voice had predicted, he was not seriously injured. Every time an event came true, it was as if a sharp blade was thrust into the soul. A glacial shiver ran down my spine, and my heart pounded. It was not only the accuracy of the predictions, but also the sensation that there was something dark, malevolent behind it all. It almost seemed as if a dark force wanted to draw me to its side. Finally, after my neighbor's accident, I couldn't take any more. I looked at that old phone with a feeling of dread I'd never felt before. In a fit of fear and rage, I grabbed the phone and threw it against the wall. The phone shattered into 1,000 pieces, breaking the silence of the house. I immediately felt lighter, as if I had freed my house from a dark presence. Since then, I have sworn never to have a landline phone in my house.
And with that, we end our stories for tonight. These were 3 true or alleged terrible stories that someone experienced after returning from work. It could be you too. If you have similar stories or have experienced paranormal experiences, please share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share and activate the bell to not miss the next stories. Until next time, remember, terror can hide where you least expect it.